Welcome to my video on parabolas. So there are three forms of parabolas. These are all basically the same thing. They will always give you the same thing, but they were just written in different forms. And in the different forms, sometimes it's easier for us to get information from these different forms, and that's why we have these different forms. So with this one here, the top one is just your normal quadratic trinomial form. The second one is called the turning point form. Why? Is because P and Q represent the turning point. Now, if we look at that, P and Q will always be the turning point. So minus P, Q will be the turning point of your parabola. So that is called the turning point form. It's very important. And remember that this form comes about by completing the square of the trinomial form. Okay, so the one above it, so is that trinomial form or quadratic. How do you get to the turning point form? You just complete the square, and we'll go through that again eventually in this series of videos. But there'll probably be about 3 or 4 parts to this video. Okay, then the last form that you use is the intercept form. This one is helpful when we have intercepts or when we want to, basically when we have the intercepts or when we're sketching, they might give us this form and then we can sketch using the fact that R1 and R2 are the intercept values. Okay. So your intercepts obviously will be, the sign will change. So x, your intercepts will be x equals R1, x equals R2. Okay, so these are the 3 forms that we use to draw and also to not only to sketch parabolas, but sometimes we need to go from a sketch to a equation, and we will be asked sometimes to go to the top one, but sometimes it'll be easier to use these two to get to that top expression. So we'll look at that in part 2 of this video. Okay, so let's start with the first part. There are 3 things that you need to basically do with these functions. Is you need to be able to go from the equation to the graph, which is sketching. Okay, so that's the first thing here, number 1. Number 2 is you need to get the graph and you need to go to an equation. So basically you'll be given the graph and they will ask you for the equation of the parabola. Number 3 is an interpretation and transformations of parabolas. So we're going to look at how we can interpret these graphs and when the function is greater or less than 0, or we're going to look at, so when you have like this situation where it's like that, or we're going to look at also transformation where we are reflecting a parabola, okay, or shifting the parabola, okay. So let's start with the first one, sketching. Now sketching all depends on what they give you. In what form have they given you the equation? Because remember, there are 3 forms. So for the first type, it is when they give it in the trinomial form, which is going to just be f of x equals plus 6. Okay, so let's say they give it to you in this form. This is our normal trinomial form or quadratic form. Now, remember from linear graphs, when we sketch a graph, we set y to 0, we set x to 0. Okay, and why do we do this? Is because it helps us find the intercepts of the graph. So step 1, okay. So step 1, find the intercepts of the graph. Okay. To do that, we need to set this function. We need to set y to 0, and then we'll set x to 0. So let's set y to 0 first to find the x intercepts. So x intercepts. Okay. And we will solve this function into its two factors. So we're factorizing the top function. So remember, when we're looking at this, we're looking at the factors of 6. That'll be 1 and 6, or 2 and 3. But now 2 and 3, if we subtract that 3 from 2, you definitely get plus 1. So we're going to see that that needs to be a 3 and a 2. And then that will be your x. And now we need to get minus 6. So it'll be definitely a plus and a minus, and then plus 1, so it'll be plus 3 minus 2. So x is equal to minus 3, or x is equal to 2. So those are our intercept values. So step 1, find your intercepts. Okay. Next step, we can easily find our y-intercept, because when you have it in this form, the trinomial form, your last constant, this number here, okay, oops, that number here, this thing here, that one is your c value, which is going to be your y-intercept. Because if you set x to 0, you can see that if I set x to 0, let's just show you. If I set x to 0, that means I have 0 squared plus 0 minus 6. So when x is 0, we know that this value is minus 6. So now we have our intercepts. Okay. Now the only other thing you'll need is your turning point, because remember, we always need a turning point to sketch this thing. So let's do that. So turning point. Now when it's in this form, there are two ways you can get the turning point. The easier way is to just use the formula x is equal to minus b over 2a. Now this thing gives you the x value of your turning point. Okay, so remember that this is the x value of the turning point. So you still need to find the y. Okay, so we sub in our values. So minus b, so b in this case is plus 1. So that's minus 1, and a was just 1. So that will be a half. And then what is your y value? Your y value, you're definitely going to need that as well. You can sub this back into your function and find your y. Okay, so we'll sub it back in. So we'll say f of x minus a half. Sub it back into your function. Okay, plus minus 6. And what do we get? We are going to get, let's just quickly work that out. You can also follow along with me by doing this. Okay, so I'm getting a strange value, but that's okay. Minus 6.25. Okay. Okay, so this is our turning point. So it'll be minus a half and okay. Now you sketch. Okay. Now the third step as well, before you sketch this thing, you actually do want to determine whether it's going to be a sad face or a happy face. And to do that, we know whenever we have a smiley face, the value of a is greater than 0. What am I talking about? The a? The a, remember, is the number in front of here. So in front of the x squared, is it positive or negative? So in this case, it's positive. So it will be a smiley face. Okay. If a was negative, it will be a sad face. Okay. So that is your step-by-step method there. And now we're going to just plot this quickly, and it will be minus 3 and 2. So minus 3 and 2. Okay, just doing a general sketch. And then a half and minus 6. So it's going to be down here somewhere. Okay, that'll be your half, negative a half. And here is your minus 6.25. Okay, and then what you're going to do is draw through your points. Okay, and back up again. Now, obviously you can then write your function as well next to, because that does, they usually do mark that. So write your function out next to the graph. Okay, and your x and y, obviously. So that's usually what they mark. Okay. If they ask you for a point, an extra point on this parabola, how will you get that? You would sub in any x value into your parabola equation here at the top and find the corresponding y, and then just put the point on your graph. Okay, so if they did want an extra point for that one. Right, now option 2, let's look at the next form. What if they gave it to you in the turning point form? So let's do an example where they gave it to you in the turning point form. Now, remember that the turning point form tells us quite a bit about the graph. So let's do this example. Okay, so if you have something like this, okay, that is in the turning point form, which means that we already know the turning point, so we don't have to do that step. But remember, we still need to get the intercepts. So your first step will be number 1, always get the intercepts, okay? Intercepts is always your step 1. Okay, so get your y and your x intercepts. So how do we do that? We set y to 0 and we set x to 0. Okay, so in this case, if we set x to 0, what are we going to get? Y is equal to 0 minus 2 squared plus 1. That's going to be 4 plus 1 is 5. Y equals 5. And then if we set the other to 0, so y to 0. So this was finding your y-intercept, eh? This is now your x-intercept. Let's solve. Okay. So your first step is always intercepts, okay? Then you go to turning point. So step 1, intercepts. Step 2, turning point. Step 3, shape of the graph. Step 4, draw the graph. Okay. So now we're going to say, what is happening here? Well, I'm going to take this thing over. I'm going to solve it with the square root method. Okay. And if you have a look at this thing, now, can any value be squared and be negative? No, that is impossible. So that means we're going to have no solutions here, or no real solutions, okay? We're only going to have non-real solutions. So no real solution, which means that basically we have no x-intercepts on this graph. Okay, we only have a y, and which means we're going to need to find the turning point, which is quite easy as well. The second step will be turning point. We already know we can get it from the equation because it's minus p q, which means it's going to be minus 2 times negative, which is 2, and 1. Okay, so we already have that. So let's plot this thing now. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, let's just go in a little bit more. Okay, let's go to the side. Let's plot. Let's just do a small plot on the side here. Okay. Sorry, let me just make space so you can see. Right, so we know our turning point is 2 and 1. So x is 2 and y is 1. So that's up here somewhere. Our intercept is 5. Okay. You can see that it goes through here, turns here, and it goes up. Because remember, the shape of this thing is a smiley face because there is no negative in front of that bracket. Now, if there was a negative over here by this bracket here where I'm highlighting, that would mean that we would have a sad face. So in this instance, it will be a smiley face. And you can see how now we don't have x-intercept. So it makes sense why we have this no real solution. Okay, hope that makes sense. And then the next type will be when they give it to you in the form, which is quite rare. It would be when they give it to you in the form of your intercept values. Okay. That doesn't really happen often. But let's just run through it. So your steps will be pretty much the same thing. Your steps don't really change too much here. So let's do this option. Okay. Y is equal to 2. And okay, so step 1, always when you're drawing, find your intercepts. Okay, let y equal 0, let x equal 0. Okay, so this will be obviously our x. Okay, now you can see we already know from this form that we have our x-intercept, so we don't even have to let y equal 0. So we actually just know that x is going to be x is going to be 3 and 1. Okay, so already we know that. What is our y-intercept though? It is when we set x to 0, so let's do that. Okay, so obviously this is your x-intercepts, and this will be your y-intercepts. Right, let's set x to 0. Minus 3 times minus 1 is just 3. That is 6. Okay, so let's sketch. So this one is pretty easy. The only thing, what are we missing? We are missing our turning point, yes. Next step, remember step 2 is turning point. We do need that always. So step 1, intercept. Step 2, turning point. Step 3, is it a smiley, sad? Step 4, sketch. Okay, so step 2, we need to do turning point. How are we going to get the turning point from this one? Now, it is not as simple as the others because it's in a strange form. So we're actually going to have to try and multiply it out to get the turning point. So let's do that. So you distribute your function. That becomes minus 5x, which then times 2 is minus 10x, 12. Okay, so basically this is the function. Now we can just find the turning point by doing our turning point formula, which is minus b over 2a, and that will be minus 10 over 2, which is giving me a strange value. It's going to give me a fraction. That's just because I made these up. Remember, they probably give you nicer ones sometimes. Okay, so our x value is 5 over 2, and then our y value, we go back and substitute in. So let's find our y. That's going to be substituted into this 5 over 2 squared minus 10, 5 over 2 plus 12 equals. Okay. So we calculate this. You can do the calculation with me, just for practice. And we get -1/2. Okay, so that will be your turning point. And remember, next thing is we determine if this is sad or smiley. And it's a smiley face because that 2 is positive. So it's going to be something like, we've got, it's going to be in the positive realm. Okay, we know our y-intercept is 6. So 3 and 2. And then -1/2. And 5 over 2 on the x. Okay, so that's 2.5. It's gonna be, yeah, somewhere there. And then draw your function in. Okay, obviously it needs to go all the way up. And then put your turning point in. 5/2 and -1/2. Cool. And you obviously would also put your intercepts in as well. So 2 and 3. Okay. And then write your function out as well next to your graph. So that is basically all the types you'll get with sketching. I hope that helps. Remember that you're going to do intercepts. We're not using box method at this stage. It'll take you way too long. So remember, step 1 is, let's go through them again. Step 1 is find your intercepts. Okay, let's just write the steps. Step 1, always find your intercepts. So that's a general step. Depending on what you're given, it's either going to be easier or harder. Obviously, remember, if you're given your intercepts, like the last example, it's easy. Step 2, turning point. Turning point formula. If you've given it, you're going to use the turning point formula. If you're given the turning point function in terms of the way it's written out, you can also get it from there. Then 3 obviously is sad face or happy, and then 4 you will sketch. Okay, so I hope that helps. Try and do it step by step by step. Try and keep it methodical and see how you go. Okay, next video will be on the next topic, which will be going from a graph to an equation.